All right, so we got ourselves another SX-64. Was told that this guy has a white screen, so let's just verify that. Turn this puppy on, and well, we have more than just a white screen. We got a drive, LED light is on, and the drive doesn't stop spinning. And yeah, we have a blank screen. So the screen should be simple. It's probably your typical PLA. The drive, not so simple, but still, you know, we have enough fixes in our arsenal here to narrow down a few remedies for the drive, beginning with the 7406, the Drive ROM, stuff like that. So let's take this thing apart and get down to it. First things first is let's fix the screen problem, and then we get to the drive problem next. All right. Okay, so we already know the PLA is the second chip down from here. So let's get that chip out of there. Use our trusty little tool here. And just to make it easy, I'm going to take these out of the way. Okay. All right. So here we have our PLA chip here that we're going to be replacing. Did I get that straight up? There we go. All right, let's test this first, obviously, because I'm very quick to assume we're going to be replacing it. Okay, so there's a chip that we took out of there, the PLA chip, usually the primary suspect. Okay, let's go ahead and test this guy here. It's already set for PLA. Ooh, okay. So in this case, the PLA passed. So PLA looks fine. So where do we go from here? The next thing is, let's put this PLA back. It could be the Kernal ROM, so we'll put a Kickman cartridge in. That'll bypass the Kernal ROM and see if that's the Kernal ROM. And if that's not that, then we'll have to take this board out and go after the VIC chip. All right? Okay, to remove this main board, we're going to have to unplug a couple of things here. And this looks like this has already been looked at because there is a little pin, one of the plastic pins missing here. Okay, the next thing we want to do is kind of just push this pin out. Want to be careful not to lose the pin and the little piece it slides into as well. Okay, we also have to take this board here and slide it out. So there's a pin that holds this board right here that you need to take out in order to be able to slide this EIO board here out. Okay, you don't have to unplug anything from the I/O board. You just have to kind of slide it a little bit out away from the main board here. Okay, And then to make it easy to remove the main board, there's a power supply plug that's on this side. So I'll usually unscrew the bottom screw of the rear in order to be able to pull the power supply out a bit. That'll help. Okay. So now we should be able to slide this board out very easily. Okay, now at this point, you can unplug the power supply if you wish. I'm just going to leave it plugged in because I'm going to just remove the VIC chip, and if that's the problem, then just plug it back in. If that's not the problem, we're going to do a little bit more testing and see what happens. Okay. Well, actually, I'm going to remove the power supply because I forgot I'm making a video here. And you'll probably want to see what's going on. So let's remove this VIC chip and see if this is our problem child. All right. So we'll take these little, well, before we take all those pins out, let's just go ahead and test this chip here real quick. Okay, so let's remove the heat sink here. Turn on the VIC, test. Okay, it's not the VIC. All right, well, let's go ahead and take out the ROMs. Actually, sometimes this doesn't work when the SID chip is in play. So let's test the SID chip next. I'm going to put the VIC back. Make sure that you know the orientation in the notch is facing to the right, because once you put the heatsink on, you're not going to be able to see it. Okay. Just double checking that all the pins went in, none were bent. Okay. So now let's take a look at the SID chip here next before we look at the ROMs. Failed. All right. And it's extreme fail. So let's just keep the SID chip out for now and turn it on and see if that blank screen goes away. All right, now to test, you don't have to put everything back. I don't have to plug in the I/O board again. I just need to put the power supply back, which I'm doing right now. And I only have to attach the screen plug here. Okay. And just make sure that none of the components, get this up a little bit, that none of the components are touching the chassis or anything like that. But for all intents and purposes, you can test it just like that. Again, I just have this board, the main board here, dangling. Okay. Okay, well, we no longer have a blank screen, but we have a lot of garbling on the screen. And chances are well, let's go ahead and test the kernel. So unplug the board here, and we're going to test the ROMs next. Okay, so we got the basic ROM, the kernel ROM, the character ROM. Even though we utilized the kickback cartridge earlier and it wasn't working, meaning that we bypassed the ROM, I'm still going to test the kernel ROM next because that SID chip was in play. So and this obviously is a ROM that was burned. So obviously someone's been in here because they replaced the ROM. Obviously that's not factory. So they burned their own. Okay, so let's go ahead and test this ROM. Okay, 8K, 28 pins. Okay, we get a checksum. Oops. But that is, if I press this button twice, it should tell me that it's a kernel. The fact is that that checksum doesn't match a kernel checksum, so it's not giving me the title of kernel. So that's a bad checksum. So let's go ahead and, well, now I got a whole different checksum. Yeah, so let's go ahead and change that kernel with a known good kernel. Okay, so here we have a known good kernel that we're going to test here real quick. Okay, and we have to change this to 24 pin. Okay, there you go. So you see, because it has the correct checksum, that checksum matches up with the title, and that's what you see here is the title that belongs to that checksum. If I hit test again, you'll see the actual correct checksum for SX kernel, which is BDC70B. Okay, so we know that this is a good kernel. Let's go ahead and put that on the board. Now, this is 24 pin. The socket is 28, so you want to make sure that the pins facing the front are empty. So you always want the legs, the backside populated, leaving the front empty. Okay. All right. So now that we got the kernel ROM replaced, let's go ahead and test this one more time here. I'm going to go ahead and just plug this in on the side, and we'll turn this back on and see what happens. Okay. All right. So the kernel's been replaced, and I'm still getting these. So let's take a look at the other, especially the character ROM. So we'll look at the other ROMs next. Go ahead and take out that character ROM here real quick. Okay, so the character ROM. Okay, so that's good. So let's see the basic ROM. Okay, I'm going to put the character ROM back here real quick. And let's test the basic ROM. Okay, basic ROM is fine. Okay, so let's put the basic ROM back. Now we know the basic ROM is fine. So we still have an issue, right? Because we tested the ROMs, we replaced the kernel. So now we're starting to get into RAM territory. But just in case, let's take a look at the 6510. Okay, so now we have an issue. We replaced the kernel ROM, that was bad. We took the SID out, that was bad. We still get garbage on the screen, so it's now pointing to RAM. We'll test the 6510 just in case, but it could be a RAM issue that we're looking at this point. So let's take a look at that. Okay. No surprise there, the 6510 is good. So now we're looking at a RAM issue. Okay, so let's go ahead and put this back real quick and see if we can put a cartridge in at this point, since we did replace the kernel and we've taken the SID out. Okay, so now I got the card back in. Let's take a look and see if we can get a read from the diode cartridge. So let's plug this thing back in here. I'm leaving it in diode mode right now, and then we'll do dead test afterwards. So. Okay, I'm getting a blank screen. Okay, not seeing any screen activity, so let's put it in dead test here. There you go. Flashes, so we have a RAM issue. So let's count the flashes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6 flashes. All right. So RAM issue it is. So far SID is bad, kernel was bad. Now we have RAM 6 blinks on a SX-64. Let's see. That would be UB6. So let's go ahead and take the main board back out and replace UB6. Okay, got the board out. UB6 is this guy right here. So that's the one we're going to replace. We went ahead and socketed UB4 here. And this is the chip we took out of UB4 right here. So let's go ahead and test that real quick. Okay. Okay, so that RAM chip was bad. Okay, here's the one that we're replacing it with. Make sure we test this. Okay. Let me put this board back and let's test it one more time. Okay, interesting. Now I'm getting a blue screen. That's just when screens jump around like that, usually you're talking about RAM issues, but that could also be an I/O issue with the CIAs. Okay, can't tell on the screen because it's so bright. There we go. Let's turn down that brightness. All right, so we got the dead test working now. And the CIAs look fine. Right now we would be testing the SID, but we don't have the SID plugged in, so. Well, this is quite embarrassing, and maybe some of you might have caught it when I put the ROMs back in, but I put the character ROM back in backwards. Should have known better. I need to swap this and turn this around. The chip's probably not damaged. We'll test it anyways, but as soon as I took this thing out and started looking at it a little bit more closely, I realized that that's a problem. And that's why we were getting a black screen with border. So let's go ahead and take this chip out and test it. Okay, so it's still good. Usually you don't burn the chips out when you put them in backwards, but it certainly messes up your program there, right? All right. So I'm plugging this thing back in just real quick here and see what happens. Okay, I'm not bothering putting it back in the machine just yet. There you go. For gosh sakes. All right, well, we knew we had a bad RAM, obviously, but man, that would have been horrendous troubleshooting if I wouldn't have noticed that as soon as I took the board out to check, other RAM chips. So lesson learned. I don't edit these things to take out bad stuff that happens like that. So it's lessons that we all learn along the way. Even if you're as experienced as I am in fixing these things, it still tends to happen if you're not paying attention and you get complacent. All right, so we got the screen fixed. We got what we can do the diag test. I'll put a SID chip in and run the diag. So then the next thing we're going to do is repair the drive. LED is constantly on and drive is constantly spinning. So I have some ideas on how we're going to attack that next. All right, so stay tuned. Let me get this thing back together again a little bit. Okay, so for the drive continuously spinning and the LED being on, usually on this it's UE3. That's my first primary suspect is going to be the ROM, the drive ROM, which is the one in the middle here that we're going to take out before taking out the whole board. If that ROM is bad, we'll replace it, but if it's good, then UE3 is on the board itself towards the middle. So we'd have to take out the whole board in order to unsolder it and socket it and check that out. So let's check out the drive ROM first. And let's keep our fingers crossed. Hopefully it's this, because that way we don't have to take this board out. That would be nice. All right. So this is the drive ROM. All right, so it's not the ROM because it identifies it. And that's the correct checksum. 280cc5, so not the ROM. All right, that means UE3 is what we're going to attack next. That means we have to take this board out right here. And yeah, what a pain. All right. So to take this board out, there's pins. You got to unplug stuff. So let's just go ahead and start doing that. Some of these are really tough to unplug, like this guy here that goes to the drive mechanisms. Usually a pain in the butt to take out. It's jammed, pretty much stuck in there pretty well. And you don't want to pull them out by the wires. So, yeah. All right, so this has 1, 2, 3 pins that you need to take out, just like the board here on the side. Okay, so the thing with this board is once you slide it out, there's the power supply plug on the bottom left here that you have to contend with, and since we pull the power supply out, this should be rather easy to get to and unplug. Okay, so there we go. Okay, so UE3 is right here. So I know I've covered this. I've done other videos where I've replaced where I had the same issue, and UE3 was usually the cause. Is it this way? Yeah. So UE3 is probably, well, not probably, is what I'm going to unsolder first and test. And then the other is UE2 also is, here, sorry, UE3 is right here. So UE2 also is the other suspect when it comes to an LED staying on and the drive spinning constantly, these two guys. But in my experience, UE3 has always been the main cause of my issues. So I'm going to go ahead and start with that. And I may just socket both, but if this turns out to be, if I unsolder this and it turns out to be good, then I'll unsolder this one next and test it. But if it turns out to be bad, I'll replace it and then we'll put the board back in and test it without having to unsolder the second one. All right, so stay tuned. Okay, so let's see what we've accomplished here. There you go. The drive light is off. It's not spinning, and I'm getting a regular boot up screen. So UE3, that was the issue as far as the drive is concerned. Interesting story. So a while back, a few years ago actually, I was troubleshooting an SX-64 and I emailed Ray Carlson because I found that I wasn't getting the reset pin on the 6502 on pin 40 set, and you know, and I let him know, hey, you know, I have something funny in your documentation. You don't mention UE3, but that was the problem that I had with the LED light staying on and the drive constantly spinning. And he was surprised at that. As humble as he is, you know, he told me, he goes, I never encountered that one before. But what I found when I have an SX-64 anyways, with the drive light always on and the constant spinning, UE2 or UE3 are the issues, but usually UE3 has been the issue more than UE2 has. So that, you know, so that's what we replaced today, and obviously that solved the problem. And 7707 is UE3, but it can be replaced with 7406, which is probably more reliable. And so let me plug a keyboard in here and put a disk in, make sure this reads. And then if it does, we can close this up and summarize and call it a day. All right. So give me a second. Let me find a keyboard. Okay, so let's get this cartridge in there and get a disk utility going here. Okay, put a diskette in here. And let's do a directory with the diac. There we go. You can't see this very well because the screen is not bright enough for me here, so I'm going to just brighten it up just a little bit. And I'm going to just do a quick directory. Okay, let's make sure it's not the disk itself. That's the issue here. Because there's something wrong with the mechanism. It's not letting me, it's not ejecting the disk on its own. There we go. So it was a bad disk. All right. So there we have it. All right. Reads the disk just fine. The only issue I have here really with the drive is that it's not ejecting the diskette. It looks like the return spring on it might need to be dealt with, but outside of that, the drive itself is fine. So let me put this thing back together again and give a real quick summary on what we did, what went wrong, how we fixed it, and hey, that'll be a wrap on this one. All right, so stay tuned. All right, we got this thing put back together again. Let's wrap this thing up, shall we? So what did we find? The first thing is we had a bad kernel. Okay, so we had to replace the kernel, right? And so that was bad. Then what do we have after that? We had a bad SID. Now remember, when you're troubleshooting these things, take the SID out first and foremost, because in this case, the SID caused problems to begin with. So, you know, we found that out when we took it out and we started getting a garbled screen. Okay. Then after we got the garbled screen, we put the dead test cartridge in, and then what did we find? We had 6 flashes, bad RAM, right? So UB6, I think it was, 6 flashes. So that took care of the blank screen right away. And then we had to attack the spinning drive. And as usual, at least from my experience, UE3 is the cause, 7707, which can be replaced with a 7406 chip. So took that out, socketed that, and lo and behold, the drive works now. So there you have it. Another SX-64 lives to see another day. And as for living to see another day, like I always say, enjoy life. Life is short. Live every day like it's your last. All right. Peace out.